Chapter 4. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? How much further? Panted Trix. We're getting close. The smell is stronger now and she's getting complacent, rumbled Dinari. You sure? The last time you said that, we spent an hour at that stream before you figured out she climbed a tree and doubled back, huffed Dix. We've been traipsing around most of the night. We got to be close by now. Gunny leaned on a tree trunk, hope in her voice that the chase might soon be over. We are. She stopped for a while when she veered back to the stream. We're close. Narvaez shook her aching feet. She was getting a drink. Doing all this walking must be thirsty work. By the ancestors, this has been a good hunt. Almost be ashamed to kill something this clever, Dinari said, looking back at the four-winded Shovati. Speak for yourself, Rakiri. I should be asleep right now. This bitch has gotta pay, Trix snapped while rolling her shoulders from the weight of her gun. Quiet, Dinari shushed before crouching down. I hear her. She's moving around up ahead. Fan out. No one engages until I give the order. Narvaez spoke softly out of habit, despite still wearing her helmet. Their mics clicked in acknowledgement as they moved off the trail to create a cordon. Dinari, the honor's yours. Team, we're back up. Truther's gonna be pissed, Dix muttered over the comms as she faded into the darkness to take her position. I'll make it quick, Dinari said, stalking forward toward a large tree before looking around the trunk. There was a long pause as the Rakiri went stock still. What are you waiting for? Take the shot, Narvaez whispered as she watched the frozen Rakiri. All due respect, Major, I can't. You need to see this. The Rakiri's voice sounded brittle with emotion as Narvaez moved forward. What are you talking about? Why can't you... She stopped dead as she looked down into the clearing below. Nestled in between two fallen logs was a lean-to with a small fire pit in front. A low fire bathed the campsite in orange light that cast shadows over everything. But what gave the commando pause was plain to see. Sitting by the fire, next to what looked like a ghillie suit made of the same ferns that carpeted the forest floor, was a human child. Narvaez's eyes nearly bulged out of her head. Pod 19, you seeing this? Narvaez asked in disbelief. The human, who was clearly an adolescent, judging by the size, was busy filleting a fish and skewering the fish steaks on a set of sticks, leaning over the fire. Its long black hair was pulled back in a loose braid that lay over its shoulder, and its face was smeared with dirt. It wore a long-sleeved shirt, and beside it lay a fishing pole and a small rifle. The gasps over the comms let her know that they'd seen what she was seeing. Firearm. Assessment? Dinari asked quietly as she slipped her helmet back on. It's one of their little pop guns. Probably a .22. No threat, Dix replied. She's so small. Anything else would knock her down with the recoil. She's handy with a knife, though, Dinari commented, watching transfixed as the little human finished setting up the last of the fish fillets over the fire. That fish smells good, too. Narvaez felt her own stomach rumble at the mention and checked on the location of the pod. Having worked their way around, the other three members of her team were set up to cover. Where's his parents? A boy that young would have to have parents around, Gunny said as Narvaez watched her relax her weapon. That's not a boy, Gunny. That's clearly a girl. I mean, look at her hair. Dix responded over comms. No self-respecting boy would let himself get that grungy. I'm telling you, that's a boy, Gunny insisted. It's the opposite on this planet. The girls are the dainty ones here. Are you sure? Because our time in the Japan sector says differently, Dix asked, taking her cue from Gunny and relaxing. There aren't any others. I can't smell anything but that one, Dainari said, shifting slightly and ignoring the disagreement. I agree. If she's got parents, they're out of the picture. That lean-to's built for one, Trix chimed in, taking a side. Runaway? Dainari asked, turning to Narvaez. Maybe, she replied hesitantly. Okay, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. The FNG says that this child down there is Cryptid, the supernatural creature, the spooky death forest that's been stealing food and gear from us for close to 2 years? Gunny's voice dropped in disbelief. I call Turok shit. Only one way to find out. Everyone hold. I'm going to introduce myself, Narvaez said, standing up. She worked her way around, her armor still in active camouflage. Moving silently, she moved to stand behind the little girl, now silhouetted by the fire that she sat in front of. Narvaez stared at the child as it checked the cooking fish. After a long moment, Narvaez settled down silently, sitting cross-legged. Everyone, weapons hold even if he picks up the gun. Appreciate you agreeing with me, but if you're about to do what I think you're about to do, Major, I'd like to advise. Gunny's voice was cut off as she slowly removed her helmet and deactivated her camouflage. She sat in plain sight, just behind the oblivious human, as it sat staring at the fire, studying the figure in front of her. She could see why there was confusion over the child's gender. The long braid threw her, and she couldn't be immediately sure if the child was male or female. Most young males on this side of the planet wore their hair short, while the girls wore theirs long. Only her experience dealing with these aliens gave her a clue, and given the circumstances, her gut told her that this was a boy. The child was short, but then most humans were, and she'd seen a great range of heights during her tour here. The somewhat baggy clothes he wore obscured his frame. He started to hum a tune as it moved the cooking fish, skewers around, shifting their positions by the fire. He gave a sharp cry and jerked his hand back in pain as the fire popped, sending embers flying. Are you all right? Narvaez spoke before she could stop herself, leaning forward in concern. The figure froze, suddenly tense, and turned slowly. It was too dark, with the fire to the child's back, to see the color of his eyes, but the wide whites were visible. It was a stark contrast to the soot and mud-blacked face that was smeared and ran as though there had been an attempt to wash. The child crouched, tensed in silence, like a coiled spring staring at her with terror in his eyes. Do you speak Vatiker? Narvaez asked, her voice soft and gentle. When the terrified child didn't respond, she tried her admittedly bad English. I not mean. No be afraid. I no hurt you, she said slowly, moving her hands to gesture to herself. At her movement, the child twitched like he wanted to bolt, but held still when he saw what she was doing. His eyes darted from her hands back to her face as he stared at her. You like chocolate? I has. Will give. Is present, she said slowly and gently as she reached very slowly to her pack and pulled out a half-melted chocolate bar she'd stashed by her canteen. Again, the child looked ready to bolt, but the fear left his eyes as the chocolate bar came out and he started to hyper focus on the treat. Here, I friend, no hurt you. She leaned forward slowly and reached down to put the bar on the ground between them, before leaning back and putting her hands loosely by her sides. The humans stared down at it before looking back to her, fear now replaced by confusion. He cried out, and it was a he based on the voice, and leapt to his feet, staring in panic at a point above and behind her. It's all right, little boy, Gunny's voice sounded in a soothing tone behind her. Her English was much better, but her shrill accent could sometimes get in the way. We're not going to hurt you. Narvaez turned and glared at Gunny as she approached. Her helmet was off too, and her rifle was slung over her shoulder. You look like you can take care of yourself. You know how to cook? She said, smiling toothily in a way that Narvaez was sure she'd meant to be winning. The boy looked between the two commandos, but did not move otherwise. Are my words not correct? Do you speak English? Gunny asked tentatively. In response, the boy moved very slowly, like a weary Turox eyeing a Grinshaw towards the fire. Without breaking eye contact, he grabbed a skewer with 3 fish steaks on it that had been set by the fire. Taking a flat piece of wood that was next to the fire pit, he pulled the cooked fish fillets off and warily set them out next to the chocolate bar. He raised his hands over his shoulders with his palms facing towards him, in a hand gesture Narvaez didn't know or understand. He looked like he was about to speak when he got interrupted. Is she feeding us? Trix's voice cut through the silence as the other 3 commandos started noisily walking down from their positions and decloaking. Wait, no, come back! Narvaez shouted as the boy, now terrified, practically flew off into the dark. I can get her, Dainari said as she started to pick up speed. No, don't, just leave him, Narvaez ordered, standing up. Dainari practically skidded to a halt at the edge of the firelight. I'm telling you, that's a girl, Trix insisted as she moved to stand beside Narvaez. That was a boy, Narvaez said plaintively, staring off into the darkness. Poor thing. I think he might be lost and alone. What did you 3 have to do that for? She demanded, rounding on her pod. We thought it was all right. You seemed to be making friends, and he was offering food, Trix whined, looking down at the cooked fish. There's no way that was a boy. Her hair's too long, and besides, no boy could survive on his own out here. A girl, maybe, but not a boy, Dick said authoritatively while moving to stand by the fire. Besides, I refuse to believe that was Cryptid. No way, impossible, Trix added, backing Dix up. It was her. I mean, him. This is that smell. The fish, Dainari exclaimed, gesturing at the fish still over the fire. And look, my canteen and my ration bars, she said, patting over to the lean-to. And there's a pack here, too. A marine one by the look of it, she said, holding the duffel up. By the goddess, that's Stitch's pack. Cryptid stole that last year, Gunny exclaimed in disbelief before sitting down heavily by the fire. Cryptid is a little boy. We, Her Majesty's Death's Head Commandos, have been getting robbed blind by a male child. She emphasized the last 2 words individually and stared into the flame. For 2 years, Dix added, taking a seat next to her. Makes sense, though. We only caught up because we brought a Rikiri with us. Maybe that's why the insurgents are almost impossible to put down. If their children are like this, Trix said, taking a seat by the fire next to Dix as Dinari and Narvaez joined them. No, this one's special. Most of the ones we've seen, the city kids, wouldn't last more than a day out here, Gunny grunted, looking over at the fish. Do you think he'd mind? The three on the ground, sure. Take the rest off so they don't burn. We'll move out in a bit. It's his home. We'll run a patrol, and then go back to the manor. Convoy 2 isn't due for another 2 days, Narvaez said, retrieving the wooden plate with the 3 fillets and slicing them each in half. We eat, secure the fire, then leave. What about our stuff? Gunny asked, picking up her piece of fish. He can have my canteen and rations, Dinari volunteered as she looked down at the slice that Trix offered her as the plate got passed around. Goodness, he makes us dinner and we scare him off. There's a joke in there somewhere, Dix griped, sniffing her fillet. The girls all looked at each other before biting into their meal. There was a heartbeat of silence before the 4 of them practically inhaled the rest. The meat's divine. The skin is really chewy, Gunny announced, picking bits of skin out of her teeth. This was fresh. You must have just pulled this out of the water, Dinari observed, eyes lighting on the 2 pieces still left. Major, you, want yours? No, I don't feel like eating anymore, Narvaez mumbled before looking back at the girls. There was a moment when the 4 commandos looked like they were about to have a standoff over the last 2 pieces. Just divide up the last 2 pieces evenly. We move in 5, she ordered finally before arranging the rest of the cooked fish off to the side. Gunny pulled her combat knife and the other 3 watched like hawks as she divided each equally. It's really oily, Trix noted, taking a moment to savor her second little piece, carefully peeling the skin off as she ate. It's so much better without the skin. Speak for yourself, the Rikiri countered through her mouthful. I need to know what kind of fish this is. Do you think they sell it commercially? All right, let's go. Leave everything else. He looks like he needed it, Dinari said as the girls reluctantly rose from the fire and started to march out. Narvaez waited until the girls had gone before putting out the fire and looking out into the direction the boy had disappeared in. Thank you. Fish wonderful. Sorry we scare. Leave you present, she shouted in English. She took out her remaining chocolate bar and some antibiotic cream. Medicine for cuts. No bugs, she shouted, remembering some humans calling infections that. We go. Leave in peace. Narvaez walked out after her pod, a feeling of sadness washing over her as she left the campsite. The next day was long and tedious. The patrol netted them nothing, and their trek to the edge of the forest allowed them to check in. Convoy 2 had caught a few rocks thrown by locals in some of the towns, but nothing that really constituted a response by their pod. The interior could handle that. What did break the monotony was that an interior and confidential informant had reported seeing their target about 100 miles north of the AO about 2 days before the first convoy had rolled out. It was only now getting filtered down to them, but it did put them back on their task. With Convoy 2 carrying Joy Boy and Crispy, due the next day around mid-morning, the prospect of having more firepower for the expected firefight was uplifting, not to mention the coup of learning all about Cryptid before Truther. They'd been out all day, and the prospect of getting a half-decent night's sleep in the protection of the manor was appealing. They could even have a fire tonight, and that brightened everyone up. As they approached their campsite, Dinari, again on point, signaled a halt. "It's back. That same fish smell, only it's fresh," she whispered. Narvaez moved forward, slowly and steadily, to push through the trees to the manor itself. Sitting in the middle of a little clearing on a bed of ferns was three of the same fish she'd seen the boy cutting up and putting on skewers. They were gutted and scaled, she could tell, but intact otherwise. Wonder of wonders, sitting next to them was Stitch's old pack, a stack of ration bars, and Dinari's canteen. "Ladies, Cryptid was here," Narvaez cautioned, looking down at the offerings, "and he gave us dinner." She shucked her helmet off and moved to the side as the other girls rushed in. "He brought more of that fish? I forgive him for everything," Gunny exclaimed, staring down at the presents while Trix nodded emphatically in agreement. "I second that," Dix added, eyeing the fish. One problem, though. Does anyone know how to cook it?" They looked at each other sheepishly, but said nothing. "I mean, put it on a stick and hold it over the fire. How hard can it be?" Dinari mused, breaking the silence. "You ruin big, important fish like that." A small voice sounded behind them in broken Vatiker, causing Dix and Gunny to wheel around, guns snapping up to point at where the voice came from. There was a momentary vision of a walking bush that then immediately zipped out of sight to the sound of tumbling sticks and branches that fell into the clearing with them. "Wait, don't go!" Narvaez shouted quickly as she moved to interpose herself between her girls and the now absent boy. "He speaks Vatiker?" Dix whispered. "How in the deeps does he know Vatiker?" Gunny shrugged as Narvaez jumped through the bushes to look out the way he'd left. The forest was still and silent. "How the fuck does he do that?" she bit out in frustration. "You no shoot?" The small, same voice came from somewhere beyond the trees. "You scared us, is all. We're sorry about the guns. Please come back," Narvaez called out. "My Vatiker, not so good. Gunny, ma'am, speak English?" "He knows my name, too? How does he know my name?" Gunny hissed as Narvaez waved her forward. "You know English," Narvaez started to say before Gunny cut her off. "Movie English, all right? The best war movies are in English, and I hate subtitles." "Well, use it," Narvaez hissed. Gunny stepped forward. "Cryptid, little boy. It's me, Gunny." "Gunny, ma'am, you mean," snickered Trix as the other three girls joined them. "Sorry about flagging you. You'll be A-OK. Come back," Gunny called out. The girls were still for a moment before a part of the underbrush about 20 yards away bulged up slowly, and a hand pulled away the hood to reveal the boy's face. Narvaez stared at the boy in the light now, and she could see he had attempted to wash the grime that obscured his features off his face. His hair was full of sticks, leaves, and mud, and his large, dark brown eyes studied the two women standing before him. Raising his arms again like he had the night before, he drew himself up and began chanting strange syllables in an almost musical tone. His hands moved back and forth for a moment, and Narvaez stared, dumbfounded by what she was seeing and hearing. Is he putting a curse on us?" Narvaez heard the voice of Dinari behind her as the other three joined them. As he put his hands down and stood silent, he looked around at them. Honored guests to these woods, I bid you welcome. Come, share a meal and your songs. Be welcome and rest, honored guests, he intoned in the same musical tone and cadence in English. His hands again came up in the strange gesture as he talked. Narvaez caught most of what he said, but Gunny, translating the boy's speech to the other three, filled in the blanks. He again dropped his hands and waited, staring at them in silence. The girls looked at each other, clearly not sure of what to make of this. Thanks? Gunny said after what seemed like an eternity staring in silence. But isn't this our campsite? Wouldn't you be the guest? The boy's face cracked into a smile. You're all Juanitums to me, he cackled before slapping his hand over his mouth. I apologize, he said with a bow. What I mean to say is, you are guests in this land. I have also wronged you and dishonored my name by stealing from you. I beg forgiveness and ask to make it up to you by returning what I took and replacing what I can't return. His tone was serious and formal, like it was a rehearsed speech. Well, look at this little gentleman here, Trix laughed as Gunny translated. He's so cute, Dix exclaimed as Narvaez walked slowly forward to stand in front of him. You are the Major? The boy asked in Vatiker, taking a half step back as she stood over him. Yes, little one, I am. Then, War Chief, the Major, I ask permission to prepare your Marines a meal, he said bravely in English, while looking up to Narvaez like a scared little rabbit. Wait, he thinks we're grunts, Gunny called over to her. And we are, she called back, pinning her pod with a look that would brook no disagreement. The boy was scared enough already, and if he thought they were only Marines, then letting him know the truth would probably send him fleeing so fast they only see after images of him in flight. She nodded and watched as he walked warily past back toward the camp. He nodded to Gunny and the girls as he walked past them, gaining confidence along the way. She followed him in through the brush and into the little clearing, and they watched as he picked up the armload of wood and started to build a fire. Dix tried to help him, but he refused, even going so far as to slap her hand when she tried to pry the wood out of his hands. After that, the commando simply sat and watched as he quickly built up and lit a fire. No one spoke the whole time as he went about his work. The boy was solely focused on his task and went about it with practiced ease, while the girls around Narvaez said nothing, looking lost in either their thoughts or the surrealness of their situation. Once he'd gotten the fire going, he left once again, saying that he needed to get more wood from the pile he'd left outside the manor. It spoke volumes about how nice the warmth from the fire felt that none of the girls even offered to help him. Okay, I'm gonna ask the question that might make everyone hate me, Dainari spoke softly after he'd left. How do we know he isn't an insurgent? Eyes darted to and fro. 2 years we've been coming here. 2 years he's been taking food and supplies from us, and in all that time, he never hurt anyone, Gunny said after an awkward pause. The insurgents also never found us here, and he's been here plenty of times, Trix offered, shifting closer to the fire and holding her hands up. But didn't one of us fall in this forest? Dainari asked carefully, looking around at the others. No, it wasn't here. It was further east in a different protected forest. But it was the same team of murdering psychopaths that likes to hunt this one. Narvaez seethed, with a hint of anger and sadness in her voice. He's coming back, Dainari whispered, her ears twitching. The boy entered the clearing somewhat noisily, carrying an almost comically large armload of wood, and dumped it into the fire. The fire's going to get good and hot. I just need to carve up the fish and get them on the scala, he said aloud with Gunny translating. What are scala? Dix asked, blinking as she tried to parse what Gunny had said. Simply shrugged. Dix asked, blinking as she tried to parse what Gunny said, who simply shrugged. The boy looked over at her after Gunny translated the question back. Cedar stakes. It's my people's word for these, he explained, pulling 6 long wooden skewers out of Stitch's old bag. Cedar brings out the flavor of sockeye better. Makes a great tasting fish into the best fish on the planet. Well, except for kings. He set them on top of the fish and pulled 3 pieces of rebar and 2 lengths of old wire. He set 2 of the rebar lengths standing up in the dirt to either side of the fire and offset them so that when he tied the 3rd length to him, there was a scaffold next to the flame. I'm sorry, socked eye? Like getting punched? And a royal fish? Narvaez asked, and the boy started giggling. No, those are their names. These are sockeye salmon. They're kind of small, but they only just started running. Kings will be here in another month or so, and they'll run through September if I'm lucky. After that, I'll have to head back into town. He pulled a long and skinny knife out of the bag and started to make quick work of the fish while he talked, setting aside the heads and tails while removing the bones. Wait. Hold up, kid, Gunny pleaded, holding up her hands. Either you said something I don't know how to translate or I'm missing something. She took a breath before canting her head to the side. How in the frozen deep does a fish run? He smiled at her and shrugged. They just do. They run up the streams and rivers this time of year. He then pushed an entire side of fish on each of the stakes and went back to rummaging in the pack. Not finding what he was looking for, he turned to ask, Does anyone have any salt and pepper? I ran out last night and I haven't had a chance to go get more. Dix was the first to toss a few salt packets to him, beating out Dinari, Trix, and Gunny. She stuck her tongue out at them, which made him laugh, and it made Narvaez smile to hear it. Quickly salting the fish, he set them up, leaning them against the scaffold, and sat back in between her and Gunny. So, what is your name? Narvaez asked in English, looking down at him, raising an eyebrow. The boy looked up at her for a moment before his face scrunched in on itself. Oh, I'm such a dummy, he said before standing. I am Constantine, Iquisa'ela Shluxit, of the Salish peoples, he declared proudly before his voice turned sad and he hung his head down to his chest. I'm the last of the Shluxits and the Quinsets. He picked his head up and spoke in a serious tone. Jashesh Juanitamkan, Hualaksan Sasalish. He spoke in the strange language he'd used earlier before switching back to English. I am of the Cilicians, the people who survived the Great Flood. He looked around at the group before he sat back down. Listening to his introduction, Narvaez felt her heart fall through her stomach with pity at his declaration. When Gunny finished translating, Narvaez saw that the others were feeling the same way. Well, Constantine, I'm Morona Narvaez. I am a major in Imperial Marines, she said slowly. This is my pod. I'm Trix, the woman said with a smile. Please tell these 2 that you're a girl. They keep calling you a boy. Dix, pleasure to meet you, and it would settle a bet we have. The woman with the silver bob cut waved merrily at him with a smile. The boy's mouth dropped when Gunny translated for him. I'm a boy, he squawked indignantly, while Gunny turned and pointed at the two disappointed commandos, holding up two fingers and snickering. Dinari flicked her ears playfully, and her lips pulled into a smile that still hid her teeth. I'm Dinari, and I'm the new Marine, she said as Narvaez shot her a glare at her near slip-up. The boy's eyes widened, and he pointed in open-mouthed shock. You can talk? Yes. Why wouldn't I? Dinari asked, tilting her head curiously. I thought you were some fluffy alien tracking dog, the boy exclaimed, staring at her intently as everyone burst out in a fit of laughter, while Gunny relayed what was said. That's it! That's your pod name! Fluffy! Howled Gunny, as the others doubled over in fresh fits of laughter as the boy and the Rakiri stared in mild shock. Christened by the Cryptid himself, to our new sister, Fluffy! Narvaez proclaimed imperiously as the others shouted, Fluffy! And again fell to laughing. Fluffy? By the ancestors, why? Fluffy snarled, folding her arms over her chest and lashing her tail before Narvaez clapped a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Oh, Cryptid, I'm starting to like you, Gunny laughed as she reached over and tousled his hair. And you can call me Gunny, not Gunny Ma'am. If you get to change your name, why can't I? Fluffy objected. Privilege of rank, Fluffy. Best get used to it, Gunny quipped. Cryptid? The boy ventured cautiously, looking around the group as the laughter started to finally subside. It's our name for you. Ever since you've been visiting us when we patrol this area, we've been calling you the Cryptid, Gunny confirmed, wiping a tear away from her eye from all the laughing. Cryptid. I like it, the boy said with a lopsided grin. Well, the salmon looks pretty much done, he noted, checking the cooking fish. I made one for each of you, and you can take those heads and tails and boil them if you have a pot for fish head soup. Tastes great and is really good when it gets cold. He handed them each a skewer and turned to walk out. Wait, where you go? Narvaez asked quickly, putting her arm out to stop him. I was going to go back. Oh, no, you don't. You earned yourself a spot next to the fire and a safe place to sleep tonight. We know what crawls around these woods, same as you, Gunny said emphatically. Stay here where it's warm, and when our two sisters join us tomorrow, you can make your fish head soup, Narvaez insisted, with Gunny's help translating. But I left my things, Constantine started to protest. You can go in the morning, but for tonight, you're one of us, Trix crowed through a mouthful of fish and waited for Gunny to translate. Yeah, Cryptid. You can grab your gear in the morning. Sit and share a meal, Dix invited through Gunny. Didn't you say something about sharing songs with a meal? Fluffy stated matter-of-factly. Besides, you need to eat too, Narvaez insisted firmly, pulling her knife out to cut her portion up for him to eat, and patted the ground where he had been sitting. A smile crept on the boy's face as he sat down. I've never turned down free salmon before, and I'm not going to start now.